Hi, thank you all for coming to the Palm Springs Film Society screening of The Truffle Hunters. I'm Pat Saperstein. I'm deputy editor at Variety Magazine, and I want to introduce Gregory Kershaw and Michael Dweck, the directors of the wonderful documentary, The Truffle Hunters. Hi, Gregory. Hi, Michael.
Hey Pat, it's great to be here
Hey,
with you.
Pat. Hey, Pat, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. And so let's start out by talking a little bit about how this idea came about. I know you had worked together before on other films, and then you found out that you had both been visiting the same area of Italy, right? Tell us how that turned into the Truffle Hunters.
Hard to believe, but it's true. We were in New York. We both used to live in the same apartment building in Manhattan, and we were finishing the last race, the color grade of the film, and we were talking and saying, "So, what have you been up to the last month? We hadn't seen each other." I said, "Well," Greg says, "I was in this region in northern Italy, in Monferrato, and there are these, it's like I heard about these truffle hunters." And then I said, "Well, I said the exact same. I was there the exact same time you were, and I heard kind of the same thing." And we thought that was a strange coincidence because nobody ever goes to that region in August because it's deadly hot in August. And we were there. They were saying, "You guys should. Why aren't you here in November when it's truffle season?" Of course, we didn't know what that meant. And then we started to ask around what are truffles or what are these wild and who gets them. And of course, nobody would talk to us. They're telling us it's a secret. We don't know who the truffle hunters are. They hunt in these mountains. And the guy took us out to trattoria and said, up in these high mountains, there's these old men with their dogs. We never see them. But we want a truffle. We put, like 50 euros in a little wooden brown box outside our restaurant. And then miraculously, the next morning, a truffle appears. And that, of course, piqued our curiosity because the films that we do, like the last film, The Last Race, and this film, it's all about these these worlds and these communities that haven't been destroyed by global culture and commercialization, where they retain the soul and their identity. And that was, and this place seemed like it had something special to it. It didn't. Nobody was walking around with cell phones, and people weren't using computers. And then we spent 3 years trying to dig into this community, get to know them, immerse ourselves in this community to actually find out, more about them.
And of course, neither one of you is Italian. And how did you end up winning their trust and getting access to their community?
Well, we got access because we spent a lot of time there, and I guess for us, access really, it means building relationships and building friendships. And so before we met any of the truffle hunters, the truffle hunters, they're kind of closely guarded secrets within the community, just who the truffle hunters are. Everything about that world is secret. So before you can even really meet truffle hunters, you just have to start meeting people in the community and making yourself known. So we would go into the local trattoria that was serving truffles, and we'd ask them if they could introduce us to the truffle hunter who had found those truffles, and he'd send us to the priest who would send us to his cousin, and we kind of did a few circles around the town before we really started meeting the actual truffle hunters. But then once we did start meeting them, it was, we didn't take our cameras out right away. It was really just about trying to let them get to know us and trying to get to know them. And we shared meals with them. We drank wine with them. We eventually we'd go out into the fields and see where they worked. And sometimes they would even take us truffle hunting with them. But it was only after we had kind of seen that and started to understand this world, and they understood why we were making this film, that we started bringing out the camera. And we would shoot a little bit, and we would show them what we were filming. And I think that was a really important part of the process of building a level of trust, but also an understanding of what our intention was. Because I think the truffle hunters that we were filming with, they realize that what they have right now, that what they have is very rare. This connection to their land, this connection to their communities, they see that that's disappeared in the world around them, and they see that younger generations aren't really interested in the lives that they live. They're interested in checking their phone and playing video games and not being outside. And I think they were eager to partake in this process of making the film with us, because they want to share their world. They want to, maybe not the secrets of where they find the truffles, but they want to share the things that are dear to them, because I think they realize how important. And we think they're, well, the reason that we're attracted to places like this is because we see that this connection with nature and community, it's been broken in so many places. We both live in cities, and it for so many people around the world, it doesn't exist, and they've been able to hold on to that.
And we don't speak Italian. That was we don't speak Italian. We had a translator with us, Letitia, who became our co-producer. And she was from the region, as her parents and grandparents were, and that helped a lot, because Piedmont, it's like a shtick in a lot of ways. It's a lot like, like other dialects, like Yiddish. It has a flavor to it, and a bantering to it, that only somebody from that area would understand. So she was really helpful in kind of helping us build these. But also we noticed that you could tell a lot, because she was very busy, co-produced too. So she would leave us alone as we were filming. But we also realized you could tell a lot from body language going on in conversations. And because we started to spend so much time with their families, we realized that it was the same conversations over and over again that they were having. Carlo and Maria wanted to stop truffle hunting because he was 87. With Angelo, was always he's just complaining about truffle hunting shouldn't be commercialized. So the same conversations kept coming up over and over again.
On that note, it's interesting, because we were talking to one of our editors the other day, and they reminded us that when they first saw the footage, they didn't have any of the subtitles, and they somehow understood what was going on in the scenes, and they once we even got the subtitles, they didn't even want to watch the footage with the subtitles, because I think a lot of that is there's sort of a theatricality to the language, and there's a physicality to the language, and so you can somehow feel, even if you don't know specifically what they're saying, you can kind of feel what the interactions are about, just due to the physicality of how they're speaking.
Well, and some of the scenes in their homes are so beautiful. Just looking at these rustic old Italian homes. And I know that you looked at some Italian master painters when you were thinking about shooting the film, and you shot it yourselves. So can you tell us a little bit about what was your approach, and what did you want some of those shots to look like, where you just spoke to the men in their houses?
Well, we because we were just the two of us shooting, we drove a van, the blue van says a friendly on the side, and big white letters, and it had all the equipment in the back, and also raw sausages and panettone and gifts that we could share with people along the way, and that gave us a lot of time to talk, and we would talk about walking into some of these environments and realize how it seemed like we were walking into a storybook, like a fairy tale land. And we started to speak about Italian painters, Raphael, Titian, Caravaggio, when we started to think about composing some of the shots, we started to think about light, how beautiful the light was. And so, in these environments, like we walk into Angelo's kitchen, and it seemed like we were here, here was a man who walked in with a chicken, the outside is light streaming in from a small window across a marble floor. He lights a wood fire from, this is a early 18th century house that looks on the surface to be dilapidated, but when you look at it, it looks like an absolutely magnificent set. But we took our time. We shot one shot a day at the most. We wanted to make sure that things were correct, and that to us, mainly the light and the environment look correct, is that we can choose a frame where the people were to be unencumbered in front of the camera, and that took patience. It took time. It took us coming back for years. We spent 3 weeks there visiting our same group of people. We go back home for a week, come back 3 weeks, and we did this on and off for 3 years. And it took a while until they got used to us, but then they just kind of forgot about the camera, because it's just the two of us kind of crouched behind a camera, and they have very lives. They're not really interested in what we're doing. They're farmers during the day where they're typically growing grapes, and it's hard work. They get up really early in the morning. And then for the truffle hunters, they're going out all night, walking 15 to 20 miles a night in the dark for 8 or 9 hours. So we were just lucky to be invited into that world, and we filmed it the way it felt right to us, as like a storybook.
I mean, so much of the filmmaking process, I mean, it started for us with this idea of capturing this feeling of the place, and thinking about how we could use the cinematic form to transport the audience into this feeling, to transport the audience into, this thing that you can't really, that you can't put into words when you're in Angelo's kitchen, as Mike described, or you're in one of these in a truffle forest. There's something that, we wanted to make a film about it, because the film was the way that we felt we could communicate our experience there. And we tried to use the cinematic form, both in how we constructed the images, but also in thinking about the soundscape, and thinking about the music, and thinking about the tone of the film. Like we wanted the film to kind of constantly be surprising the audience with magic and mystery. And we wanted the sound, we think the sound is just as important in the image in this film. And it's very, like the images, it's a very subjective take on what this world sounds like. It's, we spent a lot of time working with our sound person while we were filming to record a whole library of sounds that were specific from that region. But then when we took them into the mix, we wanted the film to capture not just what it actually sounds like, but what it really truly feels like. And that meant, experimenting with different ways of using those sounds. And I mean, there's the shot of Paulo, the truffle judge, when he's eating that truffle, and Enrico Caruso, the opera, is playing in the background. And like when he tastes that truffle, the sound transforms, and the soundscape goes from outside of his head to in his head. And we want to bring you into the moment of tasting that truffle. We want you to feel the delight. Hopefully you taste the truffle at that moment. I mean, that's our goal. But we did that in a lot of little places throughout the film. Like each of the characters, I don't think most people probably aren't aware of this, because we tried to be very subtle with it, but hopefully subconsciously it's hitting them. Like we attach sounds to each of the characters. So for example, like whenever you see Carlo, his dog, you can just hear the bell. His dog Titina has little bells on her collar, and they're with her wherever she goes. And you always hear Titina on the outside of the window when he's inside. She's just kind of waiting for him. And you hear church bells whenever you see Angelo, and you hear a clock ticking with Aurelio. So there's just, we did a lot with the sound to use the sound that we recorded, but then kind of try to bring it to another level that made it subjective and brought you into the feeling of the world.
The same with nature is that we realized when we were spending a lot of time in these beautiful forests that nature provided us with a symphony. That if you listened in total quiet, you start hearing dogs barking in different parts of the valley, and then you'd hear a church bell, and then you'd hear wind, and there was a spring that we couldn't see down below. And we had our sound recorders record sounds even when we weren't there. We'd send them back for in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, just recording these different sounds and compose these basically symphonies of different sounds of the region.
Well, it's remarkable to have that record, as well as what it brings to the film. And also, you weren't the only cinematographers. You had some help in the form of the dogs. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, having cameras on the dogs that helped shoot some of the footage?
Well, we thought it was important to show the perspective of the dog. We wanted the audience to really see how a dog sees and come to understand how they react in the forest with their companion. And we thought it was easy. we thought it'd be really simple. Just take a GoPro, put it on the dog's head, and send him to the forest. And of course, we realized that didn't work. So we lived in Alba when we were shooting this film, and below us was a shoe cobbler, and we asked the shoe cobbler after we first started experimenting with all kinds of gimbals and typical camera gadgets that people had designed for dogs, and it just didn't work. So the shoe cobbler, we kind of drew a picture of the dog's head. We had in our, we were talking Spanish to an Italian shoe cobbler. We explained to him kind of what we wanted, and he said, "Well, come back the next day at 8:30 in the morning, and I'll have something for you." And of course, lo and behold, he had a harness for us, a beautiful harness, which we tried that day. And of course, the camera flew off somewhere in the woods. We don't know. The dog came back 2 hours later. There's no camera. So then we next morning came back again and said, "Well, we need to do it again." So eventually, we got to a place that it worked. We asked them, we want to see the nose of the dog. We want it to be really comfortable and lightweight for the dog, so it could be totally unencumbered when it's running, and it worked. And what we found was something very unusual. We expected to see just this kinetic energy going through the woods, which we got, and how a dog reacts. But what we didn't expect was moments where the truffle hunter was having what seemed to be a conversation with the dogs, where they would stop and talk about very personal things to the dog. And that led us to really a whole awakening of the film, because like in the case of Aurelio and Burba, the image that's on the poster, he was talking to Burba about like what we're going to have for Christmas lunch and what he's preparing. That he went to the farmer and they picked up celery, and they went to the other farmer next door and got carrots, and he's going to prepare this beautiful lunch. And so when we got back to the house, he invited us to the house, inside his house for the first time. He said, "I'm going to prepare lunch for us." We said, "Well, that's great." So we set the table with 4 plates, but there was only 3 of us. It was just Greg, myself, and Aurelio. And he finished his cooking lunch, and it was a beautiful soup, and he serves it in a bowl, and then Burba hops on the table, and then he says, "Okay, now you guys can sit down and enjoy lunch." So we ate next with Aurelio, and then he had a conversation with Burba on the table, and that lasted more. But then we realized this was not uncommon with our truffle hunters, that they felt they have a really unusual relationship with their dogs. A lot of them are single, and this became kind of their friends.
That's really fascinating. And do you think that this way of life these could be some of the last men that are hunting truffles in this way? And what is the environmental impact, or what is what's happening with the environment that could be affecting truffle hunting?
Yeah, I mean, it's finding places like this in the world. It's so difficult. I mean, Michael and I are always searching for places that exist outside of what's become the norm, outside of global commercialized culture, and it's increasingly rare. And we stumbled upon this place, and we were immediately taken in by it, and we felt, I think once we started exploring it, we realized that there was kind of an urgency to telling the story, because it was this generation that we were filming. This generation was carrying on this way of living, and they lived almost. It felt like we were in Italy in the 1960s when we were with them. I mean, the digital technology was not a part of their lives. They were out. They were still, Carlos 88, and he's still out working in the fields. And they have this rich sense of community, and all that. It doesn't seem like, even in this area, it doesn't seem like it's being passed on to the next generation. I think the generation that we filmed wants to transmit it to the next generation, but it's just like, once the power of digital technology, the power of having a phone in your hand that has unlimited knowledge, and the unlimited scroll of entertainment, it pulls people away from the immediacy of a real physical community and the ties to their culture and the continuity of history that they're a part of. And so we see that, it's not just here, we see that disappearing all over the world. And we wanted to capture this, because we found found so much life and so much joy and so much happiness in the people that we were filming and the very simple things that they have as part of their lives. And we hope it will continue on. But there are a lot of threats, and part of that is just global culture moving in and digital technology moving in. The other big threat is environmental issues. And we didn't set out to make a climate change film in any way, but as we were filming, it was something that the people that we were filming with were constantly talking about. Carlo, who's 88, he would tell us that when he was a child, he would follow his father as he was plowing the fields, and truffles would sometimes pop up like potatoes. Now finding a truffle it's nearly impossible. It's finding gold. It's maybe harder than finding gold. And the reasons for that are many, but a big part of that is climate change, because the white truffle depends on such incredibly specific weather conditions and climate factors and soil conditions. And as the global climate changes, it's disrupting that very delicate balance of conditions that allow the truffles to bloom in this really. They're found mostly in Italy and in a bit in some of the neighboring countries, but they can't be cultivated. So if they're not growing in the wild in this region, they're not growing at all. So they could disappear forever. That's what a lot of the truffle hunters that we talk to are worried about. And then at the same time that climate change is transforming the conditions that truffles need to grow, it's also allowing there's a lot of wine that's made in the region where we filmed, and some of the best wine in the world. But there are new areas that are opening up because of climate change that were previously too cold, and the vineyards are moving into those areas, and they're stripping down the forests, these truffle forests that have been truffle forests where these truffle hunters have hunted their entire lives, and their generations before that they're being stripped down to make way for vineyards. So there's a lot of pressure on this land and on this culture right now. But we hope it'll continue. And I guess the thing that I think gives us hope is that there seems to be, more than ever, a renewed understanding of how important having all the things that this culture possesses are to a human life, and an appreciation for this connection to nature, and an appreciation for having a connection to the ways of the past. So we're working. Yeah, I'll let you.
Oh, sorry, Greg.
Yeah,
I was going to say it's one of the few countries where foraging still exists. That's a culture all its own. There's foragers of mushrooms and foragers of truffles, and that's an unusual thing, uncommon thing in most countries today. It's a tradition that's been handed down in Italy at least for 400 years. And we hope continue.
Oh, that's fascinating about the wine growing. Well, I think that we need to wrap up, but I thank you both so much for capturing this beautiful, some disappearing world in such a wonderful way, and look forward to your next work.
Yeah, thank you, Pat.
Thank you,
Thank you
Pat.
so much.
Yeah,
thank you.